Technical difficulties, but there's always technical difficulties. Welcome back to the Blurting While Dad podcast slash live stream slash whatever. Um, I'm Brian. I am your was it Zennial now? Is Zennial Black Nerd? I think I'm in that cusp between elder millennial and baby Gen Xer. And so, but yeah, welcome back. Um, this week's episode, I'm gonna talk about the project that I meant to mention last week, but I kind of got sidetracked because ADHD. And we're gonna talk some nerd stuff this week. Like I'm gonna talk some nerds and some politics stuff. So we're gonna go a couple of different places if you'll join me. Um, but walk with me now. So a little bit earlier today, I was in a black nerd group on Facebook. Sorry, these glasses are jacked and I can never get them to sit straight with my headphones on. So hopefully it's not too distracting for y'all. Anyway, I was in a nerd group with on Facebook, and it's a black nerd group. It's a blurred group. And there's always been a common theme. Let me move this mic a little bit closer. There's always been a common theme in black nerd groups that I've encountered. Um, it always ends up breaking down into gender war stuff or red pill versus non-red pill. You'll get some MAGA blurred in there who likes attention. And it devolves into just a bunch of shouting matches. It was weird how the entire recast T'Challa thing, it hijacked so many black nerd groups and had people writing these long screeds and making enemies lists and all kinds of other weird shit. And that's been my experience in these groups. And I know that the intention is to create a space where black nerds can kind of get together, kick it, talk about the things they love, maybe talk about some political stuff, maybe share some opinions about things. But what it always breaks down to is the sensationalized arguments that you see on Twitter and stuff like that. And so I built a community for black nerds. It's a paid community because I have a bullshit filter. I want to keep it out. Is the working name right now is the League of Extraordinary Unks and Aunties. I wanted to include the Aunties too, because a lot of times in these black nerd spaces, it does break down on those lines, and then it turns into men versus women and all this other He-Man boys club bullshit in these black nerd spaces, and I'm trying to filter that out. And so this is going to be a place where the grown nerds, the grown black nerds in the space can kind of chop it up and have some dialogue. I was planning on doing a watch along for WrestleMania this weekend. I don't know if we're going to be able to fill the community that fast. I'm bringing an element of a Facebook group I used to moderate to it called Who Would Win in a Fight, where because we was doing death battle before death battle, like in that group we were sitting there really talking about taking fictional characters and putting them up against each other. I know that's not a new idea, but I want to do it in that group. But I also want to do, like I said, I want to do watch alongs. I want to be able to okay, that's cool. I want to be able to do watch alongs and sit down and watch new shows that they drop and talk about things like that, where we have threads that run, because I do it in one of my basketball groups too, where during the playoffs or whatnot, or if there's a game that everybody's watching, we'll create a thread for that game, and all the conversation, basically we're live posting about what's happening in the game. And so I want to do that. Like I said, the kickoff of it would be in for WrestleMania and stuff. Like I said, there's a reason why I'm making it a paid thing, and it's not a heck of a whole lot of money. It's enough for me to cover the expenses of running it and to drop a project or two, so I can put some time into building out the quality component of it. Um, I've done large groups before, and they always break down because what happens is you get infiltrated by people that want to. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've had black nerd groups where they get infiltrated by some little clan member who just wants to disrupt everything, and it turns everything sideways. And so I wanted to create a space for us. If you're down for it, let me know. If you're not down for it, that's cool. I'll see you online around. I'll see you around online. But um, that's what it is. So it's the League of Extraordinary Unks and Aunties. And um, I'm excited about it. You'll be hearing me talk more about it. But like I said, I wanted to create something for us. And yeah, it's going to have a non-bullshit filter, to be honest with you. I didn't build this just to have another group. I wanted kind of a protected space um, for us to have conversations amongst ourselves. So being in that Facebook group, man, it was crazy earlier today. Um, the tripwire is always, it always ends up breaking down. Like for a while, the tripwire was Kevin Samuels. Will and Jada is always a good one, and I think that was the tripwire today, where it just spiraled. Like it was a conversation about Will and Jada that just spiraled. It didn't have a damn thing to do with anything nerd related, but a lot of people wasted a lot of wise words on some pretty vacuous stuff. You know, I don't want to be in that kind of space, and I don't want that to be the sum total of how black nerds interact with one another online and have intelligent conversations. Because we can talk about differences of opinion that breaks down upon gender lines, but there has to be an era of respect, and you have to have like, okay, once you start going red pill, that's the end of the conversation. We're gonna, moderators gonna step in and step on it because we're not gonna start posting red pill memes and start running down their talking points. All right. And so when that doesn't happen, it spirals into something else. And that's been my experience in almost every large scale black nerd group that I've been to. Either that or it's moderated to the point where you're almost walking on eggshells. Um, you know, and it's striking a happy balance between the two. So anyway, um, it's not even about nerd culture anymore. Like I wanted to sit down and talk. I wanted to sit down and talk. I posted something about I think this was a couple weeks ago about DCKO and Absolute Batman, and nobody was fucking with it. They was talking about something that was completely unrelated to anything nerd. Like it was another argument from online, another men versus women pop the balloon argument that just jumped over and it spilled out. It was ridiculous. Okay. And so, like I said, I just want to have a space for us. So I'm kind of skipping a lot of my other pitch, but if you want to talk about it, hit me up. I'm leaving the invitation open. Like I said, if you don't want to be down with it, that's cool with me too. All right. So let's get into it because I have my political stuff. I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit and come back to that. Let's talk RoboCop. We're about due for a new RoboCop movie, right? Like I think we're about due for it. We had a RoboCop game that dropped a couple years ago that was pretty dope, and I think it added something to the lore. But let's talk about RoboCop. Here's the thing. I'm not in the camp of everybody that hates the RoboCop remake, bro. Like I'm a mega fan of the movie. My story of RoboCop is I saw this joint when I was like 8 or 9 years old in theaters, and I watched a guy get melted in toxic waste. I watched a guy get shot in the crotch. I watched RoboCop spike somebody in the neck in the jugular vein. I'm 8 years old. It was the most hyper violent thing I'd ever seen. It instantly became my favorite movie of all time. Instantly, not even a question. It's RoboCop and Predator. Depending on what mood I'm in, those are my top 2 movies ever. I have both of them memorized. And when we talk about RoboCop, I think one of the things people fixate on is the hyper violence and the stylized violence and whatnot. The satire gets mentioned. Paul Verhoeven was really in his bag with this one. It's kind of the same thing with Starship Troopers. Like, dude was in his bag. Total Recall, but I love this movie. And as somebody who hyperfixates on stuff, it's been an object of my fixation for a long ass time. So I don't know who I was engaged, who I was talking to, and basically they considered the RoboCop remake like almost like this crime against humanity, right? Like they thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to the character, and it destroyed a lot of things. I'm here to kind of mention that I didn't think the remake was bad, but there are elements that were really, really missing and really lacking in it. But there are parts of it that were actually really good, considering what this was. It was a PG-13 remake of one of the most violent movies that had ever come out. And the PG-13 was kind of the this kiss of death. If I'm gonna keep it 100% honest, the PG-13 and fitting in the conventions of PG-13 absolutely made RoboCop 3 completely abysmal. I saw it with my own eyes. That is the worst RoboCop movie I've ever seen. And I watched the Prime directives. I watched the show, I think on Sci-Fi Network. RoboCop 3 was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. it was it was it missed the mark in so many different places. We didn't have Peter Weller revising the role. They killed off Anne Murphy for no real good reason. The villain was just it was still OCP, but it wasn't. There was a lot wrong with it. And I know there's a lot of drama around RoboCop 2. One of the things that RoboCop 2 misfired on was they wanted to take, they thought that the reason why RoboCop worked was the violence. And they didn't really contextualize the violence. It was just violence for the sake of violence. And it wasn't really meant to further the story or anything or shock or anything. It was just there. And so that's where RoboCop 2 failed. And I knew, what's up? How you doing? Yeah, I'm talking about my ADHD fixated on RoboCop this week, and so I wanted to kind of talk about what I liked about the remake, but why the original is still one of my goats. So, let's set the stage. Like I said, I'm 8 years old. My mom took me to see RoboCop in theaters. Now, I gotta lay this out to you. When RoboCop dropped, RoboCop was so violent it almost got an X rating. Like it was that level of violence. A lot of times when you see people reacting to RoboCop online, the version that they're reacting to is the director's cut, because the director's cut, there's stuff in there that they could not show. The scene where Murphy got essentially killed and turned into RoboCop was so hyper violent that they had to dial it back, because there's a scene where his hand like gets disintegrated with the shotgun blast. It's really bad. Or where his arm gets shot off. And so they took that out of the theater cut. Okay. And the other part is, oh, the Ed 209 scene when we first get introduced to Ed 209, and he basically vaporizes Bro. Like he turns Bro into a fine red mist. In the uncut scene, in the director's cut, that scene is a lot longer and he gets a lot more shots. And so one of the things about it, like I said, I'm 8 years old watching this. And like I said, I'm watching one of the most violent movies of the 80s at 8 years old, and my eyes are just wide, and it instantly became my favorite movie of all time. So I have every single part of that movie memorized and committed to memory. It's not one of my proudest moments, but it is what it is. So one of the challenges is when you have a movie like RoboCop, which is really based in the 80s, and is really based in the me generation, the hyper capitalism, the Reagan era, because you got to understand, Reagan era was its own. It was almost like its own dystopian end of days kind of thing, depending on where you lived. Detroit was in that space. Parts of where I grew up was kind of in that space. Post Reagan era, in black neighborhoods, you're dealing with crack epidemic and stuff like that. It felt like there are parts of that movie that landed because it actually is like, yeah, this is a vision for the future based on what was happening in inner cities around the world, inner cities all over the country. And so the way that they drew that up, it would met with the time. Now we jumped to 2020, we jumped to 2014's version of RoboCop, and the dystopian future. They kind of made it kind of a tech bro thing, which was cool, but it lost a little bit of that edge, if that makes sense. It didn't feel quite as bleak. That's a Yeah, it was even in the movie itself. Yeah. It was the commercials in the original RoboCop, they're like, we were scared of nuclear annihilation, and they made a game called Nukem in it. Um, you know, the entire heart replacement thing, that was like a lot of news talking about artificial hearts and things along those lines. Um, and so it felt like a real future that we'd be heading to out of the Reagan era. You know, the 6000 SUX, the car, the big the gentrification subplot, where they were actually letting OCP was this mega corporation that owned all the municipal services in Detroit, and they were letting it go to shit so that they could come in and basically build on top of the citizens. And they were going to essentially elect Clarence Boddicker as not elect, but install him as the king of Detroit, so that he could uh, run his criminal enterprises and enrich himself. But it also benefited OCP because it drove down the property values and they could chase people out. They did mention it in RoboCop 3. That's the one thing I will say on their behalf. But it captured a lot of the heartbeat of what was going on around the country. And I think for me, that's one of the first misses of the remake. It couldn't quite capture it. It did capture the fact that it was kind of icky that OCP had their hands in so many different enterprises, and they were just unchecked as a government contractor. But they modernized it, and I don't know if that says more about them or us. The fact that it didn't seem as scary. It felt like we are more accepting of mega corporations than we were in the 80s. So the thing about it is, the piece that they did capture, and I'm off my notes, but the piece that I think they really did nail in the remake was Alex Murphy's his shock and horror at what he got transformed into against his will. They captured that really, really well. How jarring it was. But the biggest piece, the biggest miss. Yeah, turned him into Paul Blart RoboCop. I like that. The biggest piece that they missed, the biggest miss of the remake was Clarence Boddicker. Clarence Boddicker was the perfect villain for that RoboCop, for the first RoboCop movie. He wasn't necessarily charming, but you laughed at him when he had the driest sense of humor. I think that's why I ended up liking that 70s show, because it's Red Foreman. I love that, the way he portrayed forgot what dude's name is. I love the way he portrays the character. It's such a dry, pissed off sense of humor, and he encompassed it really, really well as Clarence Boddicker, where it was just like this. He was a complete terrible person without a single redeeming quality, but you still liked him. That's hard to pull off. And there was no Clarence in the remake. We had a couple of different villains who stood in, but there wasn't anybody that had that punch of him in that movie. And he was kind of a driving force. You could actually believe that he would be something to cause RoboCop trouble, just because of his capacity to give a fuck was completely turned off in that movie. And even the way they introduced him in the opening scene, when they introduced Clarence Boddicker in the opening frame of the movie, with his first scene, where they had blown up the bank safe and the dude burnt the money, and watching Clarence just go off on the dude and punch him in the face, and then kick another guy who was kick the driver because he wasn't doing what Clarence asked him to do at that time. It encapsulated exactly who he was. We didn't have that villain in the remake, and I think that hurt the movie more than anything else. I think what they had, oh boy, that was um from I could see him. They had him in the Freddy Krueger remake. They also had him in the Watchmen. You know, he was kind of a villain, but not. It was just they didn't really nail the villain, and I think that upset the entire movie. The special effects were good. Um, the story of Alex Murphy and him becoming RoboCop was good. The relationship with his family, where it really jacked up his family, that made sense. There were logical beats in that made sense. That's what made it work. The pieces that didn't work were poor villains. The stakes were weird at the end, where he's going to go rescue his family as opposed to really solving his own murder. Like, I think they wrapped that up, if I remember. I haven't seen it in a little bit. I think they almost wrapped that thread up in the middle of the movie. Like, I think that was the piece that was missing. Okay. So Murphy's aware. That's the horror. And I think it translated really well in the remake. Corporate ownership of a human being, that translated really well in the remake. That's what makes it uncomfortable. Okay. And I think you needed to have that little bit of disconcernment. Now, if we had a villain that matched that level of energy, I think the remake could have been a lot better. Plus, the PG-13 was kind of bullshit. Like, it was it's kind of weak sauce. I can't front on that piece of it. It was too clean. It tried to be gritty. The remake tried to be gritty, but it was almost too clean. Where when you watch RoboCop, it's really cleanly shot. It's really clear, but there's such an element of grime in the backdrops, and it's so bleak. Every room is bleak. There's no real warmth in any of it. It really informed the world, and I think that made it more compelling to watch. Okay. But it was gritty. It was messy. It was clean, but it looked disheveled. And it felt real in a way that a lot that the modern one didn't. The modern one felt a little bit cartoony. You know, showing the family is where I think the remake actually did better. And they tried to go back and show the family, like they showed clips of the family in RoboCop's family in the original movie, where it's just his passing memories. But I think in the second one, it might have been second or third one. I think it was the second one, where he ended up meeting his wife again, and they had fried his brain, and so it didn't work. It didn't work. But yeah, no villain presence at all. Absolutely killed that. All right, let me see. It didn't want to push back against any capitalist or scared corporate issues. I do think because what was it? They made Samuel L. Jackson essentially Bill O'Reilly. Like, they were trying to do it, but you could tell that they had some directives about, let's not piss off too many people. You know, they talked about the militarization, the military industrial complex, and they kind of hinted toward it. They used Samuel L. Jackson as kind of this Rush Limbaugh, Tucker Carlson, I guess, for what he used to be at Fox News. Bill O'Reilly would have been the person that they really made him into, where he is this pundit who is really kind of a shill for OCP, and is there to further their agenda and push through news stories to get favorable legislation. But they really glanced at the surface level of it. Yeah. It wasn't, they didn't necessarily embrace that side of it. And I get it, but I feel like his role was almost too prominent. I wish they would have just made him kind of a presence in it, where we never got a chance to really see him. He would just be a face on the screen. Like, if they would have done that, and I love seeing Samuel Jackson in movies, don't get me wrong, but I think he had too much presence, and there wasn't really a hard villain in there. There wasn't really a good villain in that movie. There's no charismatic, dangerous villain. There's no way they're going to tackle structural racism, bigotry featured in the first movie. And I think that's also where you miss Paul Verhoeven, because Paul Verhoeven, he had a sense for it. It's funny, the entire like the scene where Clarence Boddicker, where he came in and killed Bob Morton, and he said, "Bitches leave." That scene, um, Paul Verhoeven left that. He wrote that because he didn't know that that word was considered derogatory. Like there was some kind of miscommunication in the language or whatnot, and so old boy who played, I gotta say his name. I gotta find his name. Old boy who played Clarence Boddicker. He thought that was the funniest thing in the world. He thought that that was just hilarious. That Paul Verhoeven's always sitting there talking about bitches, bitches, bitches. You know, there was a Kurtwood Smith. That's who it is. Kurtwood Smith thought that was the funniest thing because Paul Verhoeven did not understand the context of it. But I think him not understanding nuances of American society and only basing his knowledge based on news coverage that he saw about us gave us a more honest portrayal of how other people viewed America. Where he didn't understand, for some reason, he did not connect the fact that the word bitch was derogatory in the way that we use it. And so when he wrote that line, he didn't mean it to be as brutal as it came out when Clarence Boddicker was like, bitches leave. Like he didn't mean it for, and that's just one of the things you get from the behind the scenes. But I think him having kind of this outside perspective of the US also allowed him to have a more honest take on it, where he didn't feel the need to try to vindicate or rationalize what the US was at the time of the 80s. Like he didn't have any stakes in that. And I think that gave him a better perspective on it. I do think, I'm not sure that, I think RoboCop, the remake, I do think that the director was also foreign born. But at that time, you're getting so much studio interference because they're trying to make this, they're trying to make it, reboot the franchise and make it, we're going to restart RoboCop and all this other stuff. And so there was a layer where you get that studio interference. Jose Padilla. What else has he done? I know I've seen him in other stuff. Okay, so he did Narcos. That's about it, man. That's tough, man. Like your big movie in America was RoboCop, the remake. Yikes. That's a tough gig there. Yeah, and he's done some other stuff. He's done Portuguese movies and stuff like that. Yeah, he didn't have to toe the line, and I think I think that will hurt him. And I don't think that's necessarily the director's fault. Necessarily, I don't. Somebody's at my doorbell. They're gonna have to wait. I don't think that was necessarily the director's fault. Um, having to toe the line. The studio interfered on that one because they were trying to make a franchise, and it's unfortunate. I think that they could have really done well with that movie because they got elements of it so right, and then other elements so wrong. But it wasn't as bad as RoboCop 3. And it was kind of on par. It's kind of on par with RoboCop 2. I don't really have a lot, like RoboCop 2 wasn't like, I saw that one in theaters as well, and it didn't hit the same. And I think they went for the violence and didn't go for the satire. The satire didn't really hit, and I think it had everything to do with the director. I know Frank Miller I think Frank Miller was involved in the writing of that. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Verhoeven didn't have to toe the line because nobody knew what it was. Nobody really knew what it was. RoboCop was kind of this shocking thing that I don't think people were necessarily expecting, you know. Whereas Jose Padilla, when he dropped it, like they were really expecting, they had a lot of high expectations, and that really hit it. That really made a difference. Okay, so I'm reading Padilla. I went to Sony and they were offering lots of movies, but none of them were RoboCop. I didn't want to make any of the movies they were talking about, and there was a RoboCop poster in the room. I said to them, "Do you own RoboCop?" And they go like, yeah. And I mean, that's how he landed RoboCop, because he saw the poster in the room. And that's how he landed the gig. And Sony owns it. I have my own feelings about Sony. I have my own feelings about Sony's pictures or whatnot. Um, Specifically with the Spider-Man universe. I know I don't want to get into picking sides of corporations, but I got some issues with Sony. Anyway, let me get back on my thing. I think I hit a lot of my main points. I think if they ever do remake RoboCop, I think they need to go with an actual remake, not a sequel, not a spiritual successor, but actual remake of the first movie. I don't know if they can get away with a lot of it. I think you're going to have to get like, this is going to sound crazy, you're going to have to get like a Seth Rogen or something in there, and allow them to dial it up to 11 and find a new Clarence Boddicker. Yeah, Sony is trash. Find a new Clarence Boddicker and make him the most charismatic motherfucker in the movie, because that's what he was. He was an absolute villain, but he was charismatic. Like, I don't understand it. A person who had no redeeming qualities whatsoever, but he was super, super interesting, incredibly interesting as a villain, and compelling. And he was like, when he's on the screen, you had to see him. You were wondering what he was going to say next. You know, the "Can you fly, Bobby?" The shot Murphy's hand off, like, well, give the man a hand, like that kind of stuff. It's so evil and so hateful, but it's hilarious at the same time. I think there was a RoboCop cartoon. Like, I'm pretty sure there was a RoboCop cartoon. I know the video game was gory for its time, but I do think there was a RoboCop cartoon. Yep, there is a RoboCop the animated series. I knew there was a I knew there was a RoboCop the animated series. There's also a TV show, a live action TV show, The Prime Directives, which was actually pretty decent. Yeah, it dropped in 1988. I'll show it. I got the title card. I'll show you here in a second. Yeah, yeah, there was a RoboCop the animated series. Here's the thing. The one thing the 80s was going to do was they were going to take your most violent movie and make it into a kid show, because there's a Rambo TV show, a RoboCop TV show. If they could have got away with it, they would have made a Nightmare on Elm Street cartoon. Like, they would have done a Nightmare on Elm Street cartoon. I know there's a Nightmare on Elm Street TV show that was kind of an anthology series, where it was Freddy's Nightmares or whatever. I actually watch when it comes on. They have a Friday the 13th show where they actually replay it, and it's an anthology series. It doesn't have anything to do with Jason. It's just kind of like Tales from the Dark Side or something. But yeah, in the 80s, yeah. The TV show, like the Prime Directives, was pretty good. I'm interested to see what Frank Miller's original vision was, because I think this is right before Frank Miller lost his mind. Like, there was a time where Frank Miller lost his ever-loving mind right after 9/11 and went off the deep end, and was just doing anything. And I think RoboCop, when they brought him in to write RoboCop 2, yeah, so his film work includes RoboCop 2 and 3. I don't know if we ever saw his vision for RoboCop 2. I think he did RoboCop 3. Like, he had more of a hand in RoboCop 3, which, wow. Frank Miller, like, I'm surprised he got another job in Hollywood after RoboCop 3. But it is what it is. Yeah, but he went kind of nuts for a little bit. And I wonder if RoboCop 3 was kind of the reason. Yep. Okay, so it was directed by Fred Decker, who did Monster Squad, which is another one of my OG favorites. It was directed by Fred Decker and written by Frank Miller. RoboCop 3 was one of the worst things I've ever laid eyes on. I paid my own money to see it. It was terrible. I was like in ninth grade or something when that dropped. It was awful. Friday the 13th TV show was amazing, for what it was for its time. It didn't have a damn thing to do with Friday the 13th. It didn't have anything to do with Jason Voorhees or anything. Yeah, it's not like the movies. Freddy's Nightmares was an anthology show. Like everybody was trying to everybody was trying to be the next Twilight Zone. You know, even the remake of the Twilight Zone, the 90s remake of the Twilight Zone was trying to be the Twilight Zone. And the only one that ever really got close, the only one that was really good at it, that captured kind of the mix between Twilight Zone and Tales from the Dark Side. The one that captured it the best was probably Tales from the Crypt. But yeah, Frank Miller, Jesus, that RoboCop 3, I may have to actually do like some kind of video review of that one, because that one that's something that needs to be seen to be understood. And it tried to, I think it tried to do a send up of was it Japanese companies buying American companies and whatnot. And so they were getting acquired by LCP was getting acquired by a Japanese company, and they had a ninja robot because you had to have a ninja robot. You had to have a ninja robot, you just did. And apparently you also had to have a cute kid, because they had a little cute kid in there who really didn't belong in there. Now, RoboCop 2, and I wonder if it's an apology. I wonder if there's an apology, because I remember there was a little bit of backlash in RoboCop 2 because they gunned that kid down. Like they killed the kid in RoboCop 2, like the kid that was in the crime family, that like they shot him down. And so I wonder if they're like, okay, so if you're going to do this, you got to have a kid, and the kid's got to survive the entire way, and they can't be bad. Like the kid can't be spraying down people with a machine gun. Like he can't really do that. Here's the thing, and I know RoboCop's hard shoes to fill, and I know a lot of these movies, like when you look at Predator, Predator 2 tried to dial it up, but it didn't. It just didn't have it. But see, Predator 2 was good enough where it could stand on its own. RoboCop 2 was lacking, and it was corny in a bad way. Like there are scenes in RoboCop, in the first RoboCop, that are corny and cheesy and kind of eye rolly, but it wasn't in a detracting way. It was supposed to, you were supposed to kind of mock it. There are scenes in RoboCop 2 where it's like, this is corny in a bad way. And then RoboCop 3 was just like a cartoon compared. It was about the same, it was the same vibe as the RoboCop cartoon. I'm surprised they didn't make an Aliens cartoon, like, with Ripley, and Ripley has like, Newt survives, Newt's the cute kid, and that's kind of the POV character for the kids. And they got a cat, and they go on wacky space adventures fighting the aliens or whatnot, or you know what I'm saying? And they got a ninja up there, because you have to have a ninja in a kid show in the 80s. I'm surprised they didn't make Aliens into a cartoon, because that's the vibe we were on. Like you got a horror franchise, or a dystopian sci-fi franchise that is soaked in blood, maybe an action movie where a lot of people die. We're going to make a cartoon out of it and sell some toys with this thing. Yes, we are. 80s was wild, bro. The cocaine was a hell of a drug, is really, like, we talk about it when it comes to, like, when we see old clips on old clips of Soul Train and stuff, where people joke about cocaine was a hell of a drug. The coke was flowing in Hollywood in the 80s. And we got some of the most batshit insane things out of the 80s. Like I said, taking Rambo and making him a cartoon character was nasty work. All right, let me see where I'm at. So let's get into it. All right, so we're going to pivot off of RoboCop. I'm probably going to do a longer form video about these two topics that I'm talking about back to back. Let's talk about my boy Moon Knight. Let's put him up on the screen. Let's put Mark Spector up on the screen. That's my boy. He ain't Batman. And I know that the joke is, been kind of, Moon Knight is just Marvel's version of Batman. Moon Knight, he's not necessarily like the only things that make Moon Knight and Batman super similar is the cape and the cowl and being out at night. Okay. Um Moon Knight, I just couldn't. Which show? Which show did the RoboCop show? Oh, the Moon Knight show. Okay, so I got into the Moon Knight show just because I wasn't going in expecting any superhero stuff. I was going in where it was going to be a character study of Mark Spector. And that's what I got. So I know going in with superhero. Oh yeah. So it goes so and I think what's the it's based on the Moon Knight show was based on a specific run, and the name is tip of the tongue. The name is tip of the tongue. Uh but the entire comic book that it really came from, the comic book that the run that it was really based on was it was a character study of him with his dissociative identity disorder. And it spent a lot of time there. It spent a lot of time there. And so I didn't expect it to be your traditional superhero show. And for me, it was kind of breath of fresh air, but I could see how if you're so used to Marvel shows and Marvel really getting into the superheroism, there wasn't a ton of that in there. And so but it was really based on was it y'all got to help me out because I know the names are the thing that elude me. uh it wasn't Flannery Connor. Best Moon Knight must reads. Jed McCase. It was really based on, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that Moon Knight show was really based on Jed McKay's run, whereas more of a character study of the character. It tried because it's Moon Knight is almost one of those, and I was shocked that they did it. It's almost it's almost like for a long time they thought Lord of the Rings was an unfilmable movie, and it Moon Knight is kind of that. If you don't lean in on the action side of it, um, it's almost I almost there was a time where I thought Moon Knight was going to be an unfilmable character, an unfilmable TV show. Yeah, but see, that's what the book felt like. It was supposed to it was supposed to feel disjointed, and that's why I know a lot of people got thrown off by it. I've talked to a lot of people with it, and that was the entire intention. And I question, I do question how they rolled it out without necessarily preparing people. Like this isn't going to be like anything. It's not going to meet any of your expectations. Okay. Um, it felt like a mess. I get it. As far as I went with it, how far did you get? Um, and I think the thing that they did lack on was the action, but they did start tying some pieces together because they tried to give you a lot of what fractured his psyche. And so there was a lot of jumping between his headspace and real life, and you never quite knew which was real, which is really the character of Moon Knight. Yeah. The I'm telling you, if you want to understand the character and you want kind of a psychological dive into him, and you're looking for some action, but it's really kind of a character driven thing. Jet McKay's first run on Moon Knight, he's writing it again. But his run on Moon Knight is really, really good. And it really gives a lot. It really gives a lot to the character. I can always recommend the Jed McKay run. I saw Moon Knight when I was a younger kid, and I just thought he looked cool, and that's as far as it went. Okay. Um, I thought, Jeff Lemire's Moon Knight is actually really I like Jeff Lemire's Moon Knight too. I like the stuff that Jeff Lemire did on Moon Knight as well. Um, but yeah, and Jeff Lemire's run on Moon Knight really showed earlier that it gave some history to the dissociative identity disorder. Um, but like I said, the show, I get it. I understand. I don't blame anybody for not really connecting with the show, because the show is almost the source material is almost unfilmable. Um, but it also showed, the Jeff Lemire's run. I love Jeff Lemire's. I love Jed McKay's run. Jed McKay, if I might be confusing the two, Jed McKay really established the team around Moon Knight and the House of Mysteries and all that other stuff. Um, Jeff Lemire really leaned into the dissociative identity disorder and how being taken over by the spirit of Khonshu and how these things were in conflict. And yeah, and Mark acknowledged the fact that his brain didn't necessarily work the way that everybody else's worked. But anyway, I digress. But Moon Knight isn't Batman, and so quick backstory: he's connected to the moon god Khonshu, an Egyptian god. He has multiple identities. Stephen Grant, Jake Lockley. The identities serve purposes, and they're not just random. Calling him Marvel's Batman isn't lazy. It is kind of a lazy analysis, because Batman tries to control his trauma. Moon Knight is just kind of navigating. Like he's just a passenger wherever the car takes him. The difference between Batman and Moon Knight, and this is the rawest thing. Batman dodges punches. Moon Knight will take a punch just to piss him off, so that he has a reason to hurt you worse when he gets his hands on you. Batman has a no killing rule. Like, he won't kill you. He might maim you. He might put you in a wheelchair, hospitalize you for a while, but he won't kill you. Moon Knight really doesn't care. He doesn't care what happens to you. He doesn't care what happens to you. If you survive, cool, you survive. But if not, it is what it is. And I think, to me, that's the thing. He's more of a blunt instrument. I know in the comic books it's really interesting, because they use Taskmaster as kind of a reference character to talk about how different characters fight or whatnot. He doesn't like Moon Knight's fighting style, because Moon Knight will take a punch. He'll take a punch to hit you harder. And it's a high damage thing. I think for a while, and I don't know if this is still part of the character, Moon Knight's character was a heavyweight boxer, and that informed his fighting style. He that's what really drives him. Plus, the other side is Batman, in terms of street level, Batman is street level in DC, which apparently in the Batman comic books means anywhere from 800 pounds to almost 2 tons, I guess. Because I've seen Batman lift 1,000 pounds. Moon Knight is low tier superhuman, depending on the phase of the moon. And so he can get up, like, he can become super strong. I saw one one run on Moon Knight where he basically like sunned the Avengers, which was really crazy. But he's presented as he is a little bit higher level threat than Batman is. Like, Moon Knight can beat you to death accidentally. Like, he can punch your head off on a full moon. He can punch your head off. He can punch a human being's head right off of their shoulders. And so the thing that I love about Moon Knight is where Spider-Man tries to be funny. And sometimes Spider-Man's funny, sometimes he's not. But Spider-Man's really trying. Moon Knight is just saying what's in his mind, and it just comes out as funny. The interaction between him and the Punisher is really interesting, where, it's kind of this gallows humor, where Punisher's like, "Hey, Mark, still crazy? Are you still crazy?" And he's like, "Hey, Frank, your family's still dead?" Like, that's the kind of deadpan humor Moon Knight has. But the other characters in Marvel reacting to Moon Knight's always kind of an interesting thing to me. And they've had to tone it down, because it did really sound ableist for a long time. Spider-Man saying, "You can't spell Mooney without Looney." You know what I'm saying? Like, um, that doesn't land in 2026 as well. And so it's interesting to see how they're presenting him now. Like I said, I'm kind of in. I've been, Jed McKay's. I'm kind of back into it. I have some catching up to do. Last thing I was on was when they were in the Midnight Mission. Yeah, yikes! It was kind of ableist back in the days. Um, but we also didn't know as much about dissociative identity disorder. It's split personalities or whatnot. And so now they're trying to, um, I think they're trying to take a little bit of the edge off of it where it doesn't feel like they're the mocking it as much. And so it's interesting to see what they do with it. But yeah, I'm like I said, I'm a fan of the character. I'm gonna do I'm actually doing a lot of research to actually do a lot deeper dive on the character. Um, and so I'll probably be doing that in a long form characters issues. And character issues is where I run down the stats, talk about the major storylines, major plot lines, um, ways that I would possibly, suggestions of how I would uh, bring the character current or revise storylines that may have been problematic or things like that. I'm not trying to put myself in the seat of the comic book creator or say my ideas are better than theirs, but it would just be how I would present the character. And so I'm going to probably be doing a feature on Moon Knight here over the next couple of weeks as I get some time to sit down and actually do some real research. But like I said, I don't blame Maddie. I don't blame you for not getting into the show. The show was hard to get into. Um, and I think it was intentionally left like that. It's kind of like if you went into watching, did you watch Wonder Man, by the way? Did you get a chance to watch Wonder Man? And it's a big problem. Yeah. Um, if you went in, look, if you went, like, I think if people went into watching Wonder Man expecting a superhero show, they're terribly disappointed. I went in watching Wonder Man expecting a send up of Hollywood, and I really enjoyed it. I really, I really enjoyed Wonder Man to a point where I'm excited the fact that we're getting a second season. Um, and I don't know how they're going to integrate him into the mainline Marvel cinematic universe. I'm intrigued to see how they do it. Um, but I enjoyed Wonder Man because it wasn't a superhero show. It wasn't a Marvel superhero show. Yeah, it was. I get it, but it was kind of the superhero version of it. I like when Marvel does break away a little bit from the traditional plot of superhero shows because what happens is you end up getting like what was it? Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where they're taking what could have been a movie and trying to spread it out to TV to a bunch of TV shows, and it was just too long and didn't feel as impactful. Um, they could have condensed a lot of it. I like stuff like when they do Werewolf by Night, where it kind of breaks the conventions. Yeah, just watched a bunch of berries a couple years. Yeah, a few weeks ago. It was close. I like the attempt, and I think that they can have something there where they have this Marvel universe in Hollywood and how Hollywood and the entertainment industry lives in a world where superheroes exist. What stories can you tell where there are real life superheroes on your news? Like what kind of science fiction and horror can you write when we just had to deal with Thanos coming down and destroying a big chunk of the country? Like what horrors? What's scary? What can you show in Hollywood? What kind of movie can you make that's scary in a world where superheroes exist? You know, and so I like that kind of viewpoint of the Marvel universe. I've always been fascinated with the more slice of life side of the Marvel universe. I think that's why I liked the She-Hulk comic book because it did try to do more slice of life stuff. Ben Kingsley is always the best in anything. I enjoyed him a lot. I think the interplay between him and dude that played Simon was actually pretty dope. Yeah. Trevor was, I like Trevor, a viable who, yeah, it feels like an allegory. And see, that's where it does kind of take you out of it. But um, I think Marvel made the attempt, and I like the fact they made the attempt and stood 10 toes down on it and then try to walk it back. Because they made another seat, they're making another season. I'm like, all right, let's see what y'all do with it. Where we have to talk about like where it's kind of a biography of where we're going to talk about the entertainment industry. Also, I mean, like, I didn't get mad at She-Hulk when She-Hulk broke the fourth wall in the She-Hulk TV show. I thought it made sense. I like the ending where Jennifer goes and actually talks to old boy, the head of it, and gets things changed in the script and things along those lines. I don't necessarily feel like it was a cop out. It actually felt like the comic book, the original, the not the Savage She-Hulk, the Sensational She-Hulk run, where they were breaking the fourth wall, and it was a comedy. It was a comedy book where it's kind of satirizing the Marvel universe. Weirdly enough, Hollywood, yeah. Yeah, it was like all these people cause a lot of damage and hurt a lot of people, so they can't. That was the weird part about it, but I guess it makes sense because from an insurance premium standpoint, you that's one of the biggest things. That's why a lot of movies don't get made. For a long time, Robert Downey Jr. couldn't get work because no movie would insure him because he was considered such a liability that they wouldn't insure a movie that he was on. I wish they addressed it a little bit differently. Yeah, but see, you still got Disney oversight, and Disney is going to Disney, and there's going to be that balance. I think the thing that we as fans kind of got to wrap our heads around with stuff is, no matter what you see, and I think somebody mentioned this specifically when we were talking about uh, black movies made in Hollywood, it still has to, even if a movie is made for a black audience, it still has to center a white audience somewhere along the lines, because in order to make it past all the gatekeepers, it's got to it can't it has to consider a white viewpoint, even though it may not have any white people in it, or they may not have any white POV characters in it. And I think that's kind of the thing in Hollywood, where you just got to take it as it is. You're never going to see a movie or television show come out that doesn't have a studio influence, where the studio looks bad. Like, I don't think you're ever going to really see that 100%. Yeah, it was caused by his own drug addicted choices, but that's what I'm saying. That's the game. That's a safe game, and so they're erring on the side of safety, and I think that was kind of the thing. I mean, like I said, a lot of movies don't get made because of the insurance side of things, and I think that's what they're mentioning. That was a weird glimpse behind the curtain. Something, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. But there is a soft bigotry to it. Okay, let's look at a guy like who is Hollywood kind of softly blacklisted, like Spike Lee. All right, Spike Lee softly blacklisted. Nobody doubts his directing chops. Nobody doubts his ability to tell a story. Okay, nobody doubts his ability to make a movie that appeals to a broad audience. But Hollywood wants to kind of muzzle him, and because of that, the gatekeepers have decided that he has to scrape and scramble for money. They're not going to fund his projects the way that they should. And a lot of it is because he is a little bit more unflinching in terms of, he doesn't necessarily play the Hollywood game the same way, for better or for worse. And it happens to do with being one of the only, for a long time, being the only prominent black director that actually had major studio backing. You had Melvin Van Peebles, but he never really had that major studio backing. Even after Sweetback, he didn't have that major studio push. It has to appeal to the mainstream audience. That's why TV shows are getting dumber. I mean, that's why when you watch one of these cop shows on TV, they have to almost placate the audience and talk down to them and explain things that you should be able to pick up just through watching the movie. Let me take Moon Knight off the screen here. They have to placate the audience to a degree, you know. And so they have to explain things that should be obvious because they're worried that it's going to go over the audience's head. I don't know if we'd ever see a Wire, something like the Wire again. The deepest it gets is one of those was it those Sheridan, was it Taylor Sheridan shows or whatever, the 100 or so different spin-offs of Yellowstone. And even then they still explain stuff to you like you're stupid. That's just kind of how it goes. Even showing a third chapter with hidden super third characters and powers might have helped in that aspect. I do think so. I wonder who else they would have put in there, because in the comic books, and Wonder Man's, like, for a long time, Wonder Man's main ace, his main sidekick, his main sidekick was Beast, Hank McCoy. Like, they was thick as thieves. And they give their own. They're assuming that they're getting dumber, so the plot is easier to follow. They do. They assume that everybody is just like, I don't know if we're going to see another, like, a Wire, where things aren't overtly explained to you. You have to actually pay attention. You have to actually bring something to the show to get it. Breaking Bad to a degree had that, where you actually just had to they weren't really overt in explaining stuff to you. And I know it's low hanging fruit to list The Wire and Breaking Bad, but those are the two shows where they don't really explain. You just got to be paying attention to what's going on. The show will not wait for you to catch up. You just got to get it. Shoot, I know, what was it? I think it might have been was it Interview with the Vampire on AMC? I think that was another show that didn't necessarily try to explain things to you. You just had to pick up on it. You had to pick up on nuances. Loads of shows are so dumb and easy to follow. They call it dishwashing shows, where people could watch them while doing chores or while the kids were being distracted. I think corporations are demanding those kind of shows. They want to put commercials on those kind of shows. Ooh, I have an idea. What's up? There's no way they would have dropped her in Wonder Man. Like Wanda? Yeah, I would have seen, like, I'm trying to figure out who else they would put into the Wonder Man show right now. Because Hank McCoy, we haven't even determined that the X-Men are just now emerging in the Marvel Universe. We saw the alternate version of Hank McCoy in the end of the Marvels. Maybe. I don't know. That was like that, a lot of time there was a lot of, I think, books where it was just him and Wonder Man and just hanging out. Hank and Wonder Man just hanging out. But it was also a different version of Hank McCoy. Like, it's kind of jarring now to see the version, that the Kelsey Grammer version, the Kelsey Grammarification of Hank McCoy, because he wasn't that for a long time in the comic books. He really wasn't. So, yeah. Let me see what else I got. You ready to get into some political stuff? I'm ready to get into some political stuff. Dazzler would have been good, because you could have shown the music industry. It all depends on if Marvel has the rights to Dazzler, though, because that does inform a lot of who gets in shows and who doesn't. There's a lot of characters that Marvel sold off that we don't know about, and other people own the rights. The reason why we've never seen a mainline MCU Hulk movie, and the Hulk is just a guest in most shows, is because Universal, I think, still owns the rights to the Hulk. The Wire is HBO. Yeah, it wasn't regular TV. Yeah. because Dazzler has pretty benign powers, at least superficially. And I think that could work. But see, the hard part is you would have to, there are parts of Dazzler's character I almost feel like you would have to remove. I don't know. I'm trying to remember if portraying her as a music celebrity, a pop music star, if she used her powers in that way. I thought she did. And so they would have to reimagine how they introduce her. Just sparkly lights. That's what I mean. Okay. I can see that. I don't know. I don't know if they have the rights to Dazzler. Like I could look it up, but like she would I think she would fall under the X-Men, that kind of X-Men characters, but they're X-Men characters that they don't own either. So let me see. Does Marvel have the rights to Dazzler? Yep. Okay, so they do fully own the rights to Dazzler. Fox held Fox held the Dazzler rights for a long time. So maybe that, I don't know. I know Fox held those for a long time. They're not going to cross over X-Men in a B Marvel show. But there's a lot of there are a lot of B X-Men characters that they need to bring into, like, there's some super interesting X-Men characters that are considered B tier just because they're not known as much. And a lot of the X-Men that we know are based on the 90s X-Men of the animated series. That's why that's why for a long time everybody was like Cyclops is a cop. And I'm like, not the Cyclops I read. The Cyclops I read was closer to the Wolverine that y'all think exists. Like Cyclops was 10 toes down for mutants in the comic books, but the Boy Scout thing, the upright citizen and the kind of, ineffectual lame guy, that kind of came from the TV show. Let's see. Point to be a performer, fully in control of her powers, and Wonder Man, and have inherent bigotry. That's the idea for the second season, and I like that because we still, like, the studio still doesn't know that it was Wonder Man that blew up that entire soundstage. Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. So the way I knew Dazzler and Longshot, I don't know if you could put them in a Marvel movie. I don't think you could put them in a mainline Marvel movie and have people recognize who they are immediately if they aren't comic book nerds. She does have a huge cult following, but that's the cult side of it. And so they end up, I'm realizing that specifically for X-Men, we're probably going to see Wolverine, we're going to see Cyclops, we're going to see Storm, you're going to see Beast. They'll find a way to shoehorn Jubilee in there. But the ones you won't probably see, at least on the forefront, the ones I grew up with, was Iceman. I think they're even putting Firestar in somewhere. Like, I think they're sticking Firestar in one of these. Firestar, of all people. The 2000s movies did Scott dirty, but the original animated series did Scott filthy too. They made him suck. Like, that's why a lot of people don't like him. And I'm like, the Cyclops the Scott Summers you're talking to me about is the dude that was in the animated series and in the movies, not the comic book Scott. The comic book Scott was like, he was the by any means necessary X-Men. He was the first one that was like, that ended up saying, really kind of check Xavier, on the team. Come back as a Wasp character. Yeah, Scott in the cartoon is a lot more effective. I didn't like, I guess for me, the constant obsession with Wolverine has been detrimental to the X-Men franchise over the years. Where not just television shows, not just movies, but the obsession with Wolverine, where Wolverine, even in the comic books, he's in everything that's X-Men related. And I think that's why I kind of liked I liked the Krakoan era because I didn't have to see Wolverine all the time. I didn't have to get a Wolverine story. Like I could go to a Wolverine book and get a Wolverine story. I didn't have to have him in my face all the time. That's why I like the X-Men 97 because Wolverine is there, but he's not the most important character like the way they used to present him. And I understand why, because Wolverine is a cool character. He's inherently cool. He has claws, and the claws can cut through anything, and he fights it all the time, and he just is tough. I don't want Wolverine and everything. Wolverine is the Batman. There are more characters. Wolverine has more side characters that you do not care about than just about any other hero. He has so many family members that you do not care about. They don't survive more than a couple of issues, but they're introduced. He has so many villains that you do not care about. He has more, like, I know, like Spider-Man has an entire universe of characters that they can draw from, and that's fine. Wolverine has more people in his stories that you do not care about than just about any other character. Wolverine is kind of a dweeb. I like Wolverine when he's presented as there are certain elements of Wolverine that I like, but when he becomes like when they almost treat him like the leader of X-Men, like that's what got me out of the original X when the first X-Men movie dropped like in 2000. I don't want Wolverine to be the main character. I don't care. And they made him the main character. And it's almost like they made him the main character in almost every X-Men movie to a degree. I get it. He's cool. Batman's cool. That's why that's why Batman is in so many books. And he's involved in everything. He's involved with something with the Justice League, but he's also, Batman and Robin, but he's also tied to this. He's also tied to that. It gets to the point where you're telling so many. That's why I liked Absolute Batman. Like, let's just redo the whole character and turn it on its ear. I like that version better. He's more interesting than the current Batman right now. And I'm not even complete and shitting on the Batman, the current Batman run. I think it's pretty good. But I think Wolverine is the Batman of the Marvel universe. Does anybody give a shit about Lady Deathstrike? No, and they should, because she's kind of an awesome looking character. But there's so many of them. Cyber. Like, and though Cyber is the only person that Wolverine actually low-key fears. Really? You never really established him as a character, but now we're going to put it, well, Wolverine's kind of scared of Cyber. What? What? X-23 has a more interesting rogue gallery than Wolverine does. Yeah, and like Wolverine has a bunch of kids. Like there was an entire arc where he met all of his children, and he killed he didn't know they were his children until he killed them, and then they introduced them, and then he killed them, and then you don't see them again. It's like, why did you even introduce them? Romulus just looks like a big Wolverine. He looks like a tall Wolverine. I think we jumped the shark and lost the plot when we decentered Sabretooth as Wolverine's main adversary. We jumped the shark. There was an entire connection between Wolverine and Sabretooth that we could have made and established, and that could have just been the Green Goblin and Spider-Man of Wolverine's story. But we kill off Sabretooth, and we're just going to keep shoehorning in different villains for Wolverine to encounter. I don't get it. And, but I understand he's the best-selling book, so they're going to keep selling it. They're going to keep telling Wolverine stories. We jumped the Sabretooth. Yeah, exactly. We jumped the Sabretooth shark. I like Sabretooth as Wolverine's foil. The entire Sabretooth comes and ruins Wolverine's birthday. I thought that was a humorous little interesting bit that they just took and made super dark for no apparent reason. Near the end of the Krakoan era. I liked where on Wolverine's birthday, Sabretooth would find him and beat the piss out of him and then just say happy birthday and run and leave him. The last one where he literally dismembered Wolverine's son and then spelled a happy birthday with his body parts, that was crazy. It went a step too far. I just find the X-Men to be overly complex. I miss the Krakoan era. I'll be the first one to say it. But I also don't miss the Krakoan era. I think Gail Simone's doing some really good things with the X-Men book that she's writing. I really enjoyed that one. I liked Eva L. Ewing's X-Men book up to a degree until editorial started screwing with it. I feel like they got rudderless after the Krakoan era. I feel like they shoehorned in that Sins of Sinister and it would not end. It just would not stop. And it had nothing to really do with the current story. And so they lost a lot of steam of where they were building up to like this crescendo where you're dealing with Nimrod and, the massacre of the new X-Men by Orcus and all that stuff. You're building up to something and then they just dropped Sins of Sinister in there and they took all of the energy out of it. And Sins of Sinister was this confounding mess of nothing. It's like, we're going to try to recapture Age of Apocalypse, and we're going to do it with Sins of Sinister. And then what was the other one they did where they made Doug Ramsey? Where they made him Apocalypse. What was that one? Where they ruined Doug and Warlock for no good reason, where Doug Ramsey kills Warlock just to further his own ends. Revelation. Oh God, that book of Revelation. That was an abysmal. It's just X-Men has been rudderless as a book. Just pro wrestling and soap operas. Here's the thing. When Claremont was writing X-Men and it was kind of this teenage soap opera thing, that was when it was at its best. When you got a sense of who people's relationships to each other and the relationships dynamic and how it played with the enemies they were fighting and these big huge tragic events that happened. You had you actually cared about it. And now it's just so many X-Men. I understood why they did M Day, because there were so many X-Men. And yes, mutants are cool, and if you have a good idea for power, just make a mutant. But now we're just copying other existing mutants' powers and putting them into new mutants. Like I said, Gail Simone's X-Men is actually pretty good. But I do have some major issues there's some issues that I have with some of the characters that she made because their powers don't make any sense. They're not really that interesting. The characters are interesting, but the powers aren't, and they're vaguely defined. I hate vaguely defined powers. I really do. That is my pet peeve in comic books, where you just got vague blue blasty powers and that's it. We don't really explain what they do. They're just kind of this amorphous, whatever we need them to be kind of powers. I think that's why I don't like Mr. Sinister that much, because they kind of do that with him. Sometimes they do it with Apocalypse, but at least they try to explain Apocalypse. Mr. Sinister, oh God. Just the most random powers. Like, well, you can do that? Yeah, you didn't know? When the hell since when could he do that? Oh, he just decided to put it in there. It was really bad in the 90s where they would just introduce characters. Actually, it was probably around 2000. I think it was Grant Morrison's X-Men run, where Grant Morrison was just introducing new characters and their powers didn't make a lick of sense whatsoever. Underbaked, overly yeah. I think the X-Men what's happening now is the editorial team, I think it's Tom Brevoort, he didn't like the Age of Apocalypse or something, and so he's basically, or he didn't, not Age of Apocalypse, he didn't like the Krakoan era, and he's simultaneously trying to undo the Krakoan era while trying to redo the Krakoan era, and it's not going anywhere right now. It just isn't, and it's sad. It really is. Yeah, everyone wants to make a new character if it gets royalty, and I think we don't have any. You keep introducing characters in, like for me, I look at like Iceman, Bobby Drake, one of the most criminally underutilized characters, considering what his powers are. Like he's basically a water and ice elemental at this point. And they established it post Krakoa or mid Krakoa, where he can exist without his body, and you can't really ever kill him. I think Nimrod put some kind of molecular napalm into him, and it destroyed his body, but it didn't, though. It destroyed his body, but didn't destroy his essence or psyche or whatever. Iceman's underutilized. Archangel, Warm Angel. You have these characters that have existed since the beginning of the book, and we don't pour anything into it. Meanwhile, I have a whole side story with Firestar, who I don't think existed till Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Matter of fact, I'm certain that she didn't exist till Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, because they couldn't put Human Torch in that show for some reason. And so they've made up the character Firestar. And so Firestar has this whole side quest, and nobody's ever really paid attention to Firestar, but we have her on a whole side quest. And you have more interesting legacy X-Men who have all these decades and decades of stories, and we're barely doing anything with Angel or Iceman. We're doing Hank McCoy is evil again, randomly for no really good reason. Yeah, Bobby could be Magneto if somebody wrote him right, but they never treat him the right way. They treat him like he's the ice guy. I like the fact that I can't front. I like the fact that Jean Grey gets the attention. I like the fact Storm gets the attention because their powers are that level. But there are other X-Men out there. Colossus kind of got jobbed out weirdly. Ileana Rasputin gets jobbed out weirdly. Magic, they never really have anything to do with her. Again, it goes to Dazzler. We don't have anything to do with Dazzler or Longshot. Where's Longshot? What's Longshot doing? When's the last time we've seen Longshot in a book? Jean is boring. I think she is, but I also think it's because how she's been treated and handled and written, where she's just kind of this MacGuffin. I did this a couple months ago. I think that if we're sitting down looking at the X-Men and looking at how do we make X-Men fit into the modern world, if X-Men were in the modern world right now, the most powerful X-Men villain, don't look at me crazy, the most powerful X-Men villain, if they existed in the world we exist in now with social media and interconnectedness and everybody staring into a screen, would be Mojo. Mojo thrives on viewers. He gets more powerful the more people are watching his programming. Mojo, and I've been saying this, Mojo makes a social media app that blows up across the world. In the real world, he makes a social media app in Mojo world and uploads it to an app store here, and it becomes the most popular social media app, and it gives Mojo godlike powers. That would be an incredible arc. And you're utilizing an X-Men villain that people, that is kind of gotten forgotten about. Let's see. I can't. Yeah, I'll show you. Because I can't. The way my StreamYard set up, I can't see links to images. But Mojo, the big yellow, rotund, blobby looking, demon looking thing. Mojo X-Men. I'll put them on the screen because I got pictures of them, because I did an entire character issues on him a couple months ago. I think Mojo, like Mojo, I think establishing Mojo as a supervillain with social media, like that's his new frontier of social media, license to print money. I think he would be incredible, and I don't know why they haven't done it. No, not Mojo Jojo. I'm talking about Mojo from the Mojo verse. He was a main character. He is a main, like, he is Longshot and Dazzler's arch nemesis for a long time. So I'm about to put him on the screen here. If I can find a good big image of him. I think they could have done, like, to make Mojo, like, and it could be a commentary on social media. Because I know he was in because I haven't gotten, sadly, I haven't finished all of X-Men, the first season of X-Men 97. I meant to, but life happened. Um but Mojo is just, he's funny, he's kind of a troll. He makes the X babies. Because in the 90s, they were really interested in making baby versions of stuff like Muppet Babies, and so he made the X Babies, and that's one of his most favorite shows. And the more people in Mojo World that watch his entertainment, where people die and stuff, the more powerful he gets, and he has reality warping powers based on that. I think that they could do something with him. Mojo Jojo. Yeah. Shoot, make Mojo Jojo. Let's put him in there. Let's bring him into the Marvel universe. And actually beef him up. All right, hold on 1 second. Because I need to show the audience who we're talking about here. Because I got feedback from a friend of mine, like, put these people on the screen. You're the nerd. We don't know who some of these people are. This Mojo. You make him, you put him in charge of the most popular social media. You make him Zuckerberg. Mojo Zuckerberg. The problem is, anytime they show a video game, is, hey guys, it's your girl Mojo. Click subscribe, hearts emoji. They need to lean into that. Like, I'm serious, because Mojo is supposed to be a send up of the cocaine fueled TV executives of the 80s and 90s. Like, that's who he's supposed to be a send up of. Why not make him a tech bro? Tech bro Mojo, who owns the largest social media company on the planet, and all it does is fuel his reality warping powers. License to print money. Like, license to print money. I think they need to. The problem is it never hits right. I think they need to spend time, like, if they do it, I think they need to talk about like, where they're mask off, where he's actually having conversations about how addictive his app is and tweaking the algorithm to maximize people staying on platform, and say, we're struggling to get kids 7 through 13. Okay, well, we need to tweak the algorithm to capture them too. Like, where he's inherently doing vile stuff with it, because that feeds him more power and allows him to warp reality and eventually take over our planet. And I think if they did a crossover story with it, or made him a crossover villain with it, like they've done crossover stories with Mojo before. Where he made Beast talk like, where he made Hank McCoy sound like Scooby-Doo. I think they could do something with that. I think you're taking a forgotten or a underutilized X-Men villain and doing something interesting with him for once. There's only so many times that we can deal with the Dark Beast. Or so many times that Apocalypse is good, now he's bad, he's good again, he's bad, whatever. Or Mr. Sinister, for whatever reason, for some ungodly reason, the X-Men trust him to do something or use one of his pieces of tech, and it fucks things up. That's what they're doing right now. They're actually doing it right now. Well, yeah, Mr. Sinister invented this piece of tech, but we figure we can use it. Why? Why? It never works out. It never works out. Mr. Sinister invented this piece of tech. I think we can use it to do no, don't do that. It happens every single time. They constantly jump between good guys and bad guys is meaningless. Here's the thing. I understood why they transitioned Apocalypse. I wish they didn't switch him back. Like, I wish they would have just gone the Magneto route, made him kind of the anti-hero. He still has tendencies of the by any means necessary, but he also is pragmatic. Like, that would have made sense. Um, they did the entire Araco mutants thing where they jobbed out Apocalypse and made him weak. They made him the weakest member of his family for no reason, just so they could introduce his wife and kids who are more powerful than he is. And then you find out they end up getting sunned by X-Men and the Storm and the X-Men. And like, so where's Apocalypse sitting? Because Apocalypse is giving y'all fits, but now the people in his family are more powerful than him. They can't handle Storm and the rest of the X-Men. So what are we doing here? Jumping teams, sides, and beliefs. I do think the X books, I actually, that's funny you mentioned that. When I used to write about this stuff, I had an entire feature called Exhausted, where I talked about all the X-Men books and talked about there's too many X teams and we don't know what to do with them. You know, X-Force, X-Factor, X-Men, you know, there's too many things and people are popping up on other teams. It was a big deal when the original X-Factor dropped. When the original X-Factor dropped and X-Factor was the core original X-Men, that was a big deal on the playground. We were talking about that. Like that was like, oh man, the original core is Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, like the OG team. And that was really interesting. And then X Factor ended up becoming a bunch of other things, and X Force just came out of nowhere. I get it. That's what I'm saying. It's too convoluted right now. And I think that's why it makes the property unwieldy. It makes it hard for anybody to get on and read. That's why I was hoping that they would I really wish they would just hand the entire X room over to Gail Simone and let her work. You know, let her work. You know, was it Secret Six when she built that entire Secret Six universe with all those characters? I think that there's something there where she could, if they would just let her be in charge of the X room, I would be down for that. But I digress. Because she's done a good job with the new X-Men team that she's developing. If they would just put her in charge of it and say, unify this mess, and let's figure out, like, we just call it X Army. The way that they did with the Justice League not too long ago. We jump in sides and beliefs. No, I think so. Constructs are useless. I get the X-Men are kind of allegory civil rights. It's forced. It's forced because I think part of it is they never centered marginalized people in writing X-Men for any extended period of time. That's why the civil rights allegory feels forced. You know, at least, you know, Claremont had some degree of insight, but a lot of people who have written since don't really have that level of insight, and it makes it tough when you're dealing with somebody writing an allegory for civil rights who's never really experienced being marginalized in any way, shape, or form. That's where you get stuff like Kitty Pryde saying the N-word because somebody called her a mutie, and it's like, whoa, relax. But here's the thing. So, this is something. This might be a spoiler if you're interested. The latest Gail Simone X-Men book. They actually are talking about Jim Crow, and they show mutants in the Jim Crow era. It's actually interesting the way they spin it. New stakes. Like I said, maybe they do an X-Army thing. Maybe they do what Justice League did about a year ago, where they had this big united Justice League, and they would just create tactical teams to deal with different threats. And so they're all together, and you could have all these characters in this book, but you would have arcs that were just specifically this group that was dealing with this specific threat, because they looked at their powers and determined they have the best abilities to deal with this specific threat. It made the book a little bit more cohesive. It made the Justice League a little bit less unwieldy, and I think they could do that. What's your level of worst to insane for Trump stuffs that have happened? Um, just about this entire reality that we're existing in right now. We elected Mojo for president, and we have a reality obsessed TV star who's funny, who has funny colors and weird fingers, and he tries to warp reality based on what he wants to see on the television screen. We elected an X-Men villain and put him in charge of the country. I don't even keep track of it, how crazy it gets, because it just gets insane every single time. X-Men's reasoning for being marginalized because of their inherent stronger power base. That's good. You know. Oh, I just answered you, bro. Just stick around. I'm going through and answering stuff. Yeah. I think if they did that with tactically with the X-Men, and they just had one person who's kind of quarterbacking and say, okay, X-Men team, this is what we're gonna do. Because they at least initially they looked like they were gonna go back to the X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, X-Men Red kind of thing, and then they just forgot it. I think the biggest problem with X-Men is I think the biggest problem with X-Men as it goes is this. It's so overwhelming and disjointed. That the story ends up forgetting itself. If that makes sense. We forget other plot points that we've addressed. And I think if you have somebody like, if you take it back to the basics and say, okay, we're gonna have this huge army of mutants. I think you do need to give them a continent or some place or a satellite or somewhere, and we just pick out which teams are which attack teams are here for this and that, or here's your diplomatic team, here's your team of psionics and stuff like that, and we roll like that. Then we could focus and feature different X-Men characters in different arcs and really give them their own personality, because what happens is people's personality starts to blend together. You don't really know what their personality is. Quentin Quire's one that's gotten lost in the sauce a couple of times. Don't you think that you can't answer the question is the issue? Okay. So here's the thing, bro. I don't necessarily, I'm trying to decipher what you're asking. Maddie, I'll get to you in a second. I'm trying to decipher what you're asking in terms of this question. What's your level of worst to insane for the Trump stuffs that have happened? I don't necessarily know what you're asking me. And so you're asking me a question and demanding an answer on a question that's not really that clear. I don't know. I think I'm too old for Discord. I've tried it. It doesn't make sense. I think that like there's a bouncer that'll come out and say, "Hey, man, you just too old to get in this club, man. You're not allowed to understand how the Discord server works." Yeah, I know. I think there's a part of me where I've reached a level of technology in my brain. Like, okay, I'm gonna have to dedicate time to figure out Discord servers, because I was planning on doing one for this, but I started and it was like looking into the human brain for me. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I don't know. I got to spend time with it to understand it. So what I'm thinking is, was it analogic goat? So here's the thing. When we talk about Trump, and this is my take on it. There's always been a level in this country of kind of um white supremacy. There's always been a level of um people being mad that they don't have access to the privilege that their grandparents had. They don't have access to the benefit of a segregated society that their grandparents have, and then they end up becoming disgruntled one way or the other, and they either go right or left with it, because I've seen it on either side. And we never address the fact that they're mad that they don't get access to an unfair world, and they have to compete with the rest of us, and they don't like it. And so you have a guy like Trump who gives voice to their disgruntledness, and they end up disconnecting him from the spoiled rich kid who has been given everything in his life. The same person that's been making those same disgruntled people miserable, the same type of asshole who's been taking advantage of them and ripping them off and stealing their labor, and stealing, stealing their wages and stuff and ripping them off in contracts. All he has to do is say, I understand why you're so angry. And they instantly forget all the other stuff, all the other things that make him unlike them, and latch onto it. And then they venerate him and make him this hero. He is the same entitled Nepo baby. He is the ultimate Nepo baby. He's been given everything. And he's failed at every level from a business standpoint that he could. But because he had connections and his father had friends, he would always get an unlimited supply of money to create these failing projects. To bankrupt a casino is absolutely insane. And so for me, I don't think I think he exposed America's fixation with celebrity. I think he exposed America's fixation with loud versus being loud versus being correct. I think he showed that there are a lot of people in this country who will willingly align with people who are professed neo-Nazis. I think he exposed a lot of stuff in the country, and I don't know if there's ever going to be any kind of reconciliation regarding that. Because I'm seeing even a lot of disillusioned Trump voters that are like, "Oh man, he got me. Oh man, but I'm better now." And they're looking at people who are like, "You're better now, but you were cool with the racism up until what point?" So that's just my take on it. So you don't want to have someone to talk to in a voice conversation with a difference. Man, I talk to people all day long, man. I run 2 businesses and a nonprofit, bro. I spend my entire day talking to people and engaging people. The thing I don't want to do is hop online and argue with people about stuff. Like, I'm not in the debate bro stuff, man. I don't do that. I took debate. I was at Toastmasters. I did all that stuff in high school and stuff. You know, one of my highlights working college radio was having a debate and making the little girl from the Young Republicans break into tears because she couldn't answer some very pointed questions I asked, and having one of the little dudes wanting to fight me. I don't really deal with that stuff, man, like the debate stuff, because here's the thing. Nothing is won through that. From a psychological standpoint, when you challenge somebody's deeply held beliefs, even if you are able to prove that those deeply held beliefs are false, all you do is entrench those beliefs, because then they start looking for ways to further entrench themselves and validate it. There's no point in it. The debate bro stuff doesn't really mean anything. It's just a performance. So why would I open myself up to that? I've already had to shut down a comic books website because I was getting death threats because I was writing about black comic book characters, bro. I don't want to re-expose myself to that, man. Yeah, and read everything I've commented. What conversation? I'm asking you to tell me what you want to. Here's the thing. I give everybody the stage when they hop up on here, and they can perform however they want to on that stage. They can say what they need to say. You haven't asked me a real question yet. You just want me to come on a voice chat so you can argue with me. I am not that guy. I don't do that stuff, man. I'm too old for that stuff. I talk to people in real life who disagree with me, and then we could talk people I see face to face. But yelling at arguing with strangers on the internet, man, yeah, I have better things to do with my evening. Yeah, that's all it is. And the entire, what was it, the 20 Republicans versus one Democrat or whatever, those things, they don't change anybody's mind. They don't do anything. It's it, it's performative. It doesn't really mean anything. That's all it is. The debate bro stuff doesn't mean anything. Nobody gets swayed. Nobody gets convinced. It's performing for an audience. And more times than not, it's never the person. I learned this because I used to, in one of my old capacities, I used to have to go in and basically fight with lawyers for families that I worked with. I learned this a long time ago. When you're in the court of law and you're on the debate stage, it's not about what's true, it's what you can get people to believe. Debates are never about the truth. I learned that. That's one of the first things my debate teacher taught me when I was in 7th grade. It's not about what's true. It's about what you can get people to believe, what sounds good. That's why we will pick an expert. We will pick somebody who sounds like an expert over somebody who's actually an expert, just because of confidence. Because the game is, the more you know about something, the more you know that you don't know about a thing. And so you're a little bit less confident in your knowledge. When you don't know something, when you don't know shit, when you only have a familiarity with the concept, you think that's the complete depth of what you know. And so you're super confident in your knowledge. The people that are the real experts, they are not confident as confident in their knowledge because they know the edges of their knowledge. And so that's why somebody can win a debate while having a complete novice's understanding of a topic if they're debating an expert in the topic, because the expert knows that they have a limitation to their knowledge. They know how much they don't know about a thing. And so they might be a little bit more halting, a little bit more hesitant in the way that they speak about a thing. They may have to look up a source to make sure that they're being accurate. Bullshit artists are amazing, bro. They can get up there and they could confidently just spew bullshit constantly, and they win over a crowd because they sound confident saying it. That's the game, bro. I don't want to play that game. I entertain people with cheap shots immediately forgotten. Yeah. It's just people, like, it's competitive argumentation. Like, I don't want to do that. So fact is your barrier. Sure, I'll come show my face. Any other barriers? Why do you have this? Why are you wanting to debate me about something? And you still haven't really clarified what you're taking issue with. Like, that's what I'm saying, bro. Like, you haven't even clarified what you want to debate, but you're demanding my time to debate on my platform, bro. Like, if you want to debate, you could start a debate channel and have people come onto your live stream and debate and argue with you. And you could do it live and in person or however you want to do it. I don't have to do that on my own platform. It's about getting people to convince who's more valid. And so you can sound like, I've dealt with this as a marketer. I've dealt with this as a business owner. I see it all the time on YouTube. Some YouTuber will get on there. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They don't have the thinnest idea of what the fuck they're talking about, but they sound really, really confident. And what they do with that confidence is they reel a lot of other people who don't know anything about anything. They reel them in and get them to spend money on things that they don't need or things that they don't work. I've seen people get talked into entire business models just because somebody on YouTube sounded really confident about that business model. The debate bro stuff is bullshit, bro. You could win a debate and can be completely wrong just because you sound super confident. So there's no other way. Why do you need to talk to? Like, this is how I choose to engage. I've had people literally ask me to turn this live stream into one of those live call-in shows where people call in and we debate and go back and forth. And I've had friends say, "Oh man, you should do that. You can be, you could be the Black Dean Withers and stuff." I don't want to do that, man. I have no interest in doing that whatsoever, because this is fun for me. This is my outlet. This is how I enjoy myself. The moment I shift into that, it doesn't become fun for me anymore. It's not something I enjoy doing, because I've seen how incendiary it gets, and I don't want to get into that. I don't want. I, I've seen it where I've embarrassed, like in real life, I've embarrassed somebody and then got called a bunch of racial slurs. I don't want to do that, man. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to open myself up to that when I'm just trying to talk about comic books and occasionally politics and stuff like that. I don't want to do all that. That's the opposite of what he's saying. Yeah, I don't. I Here's the thing. I don't. I would never go on anybody's platform and demand to have access to them in a voice chat. Just that's not my energy, man. And there are plenty of people out there that you could do that with. There are plenty of other bigger. There are people that are a lot bigger and more popular. They have a much bigger platform, and they do those kind of call-in stuff, and they do the voice chat stuff. That is not my. That's not my vibe. I'm not. That's not the place I want to be in my life right now. Maybe down the road I may do something a little bit more like that, but not where I want to be right now. This is fun for me, and doing that, introducing that voice chat where I get to sit there and do debate bro stuff and perform for people. I don't want to do all that stuff. I want to talk about comic books and politics occasionally, um, and go up and um, talk to my kids before they go to bed on Tuesday nights. That's what I like doing. Give me anything Trump did that is good. What he did that's good? You're not going to like the answer. Are you ready for it? Here's what he did that's good. Trump showed how comfortable this country is with racism. Trump showed how comfortable this country is with pedophilia, and assault on women and children. Um, he showed that as long as you have enough wealth and power, you can get away with just about anything. He exposed that. It was always been an idea in people's brain, but he's actually showing that as long as you have enough connections, you can live your entire life and never be held accountable. You can be connected to one of the most prolific sex traffickers in the history of the modern world and be fine, because people like you, because you speak to the things that they're angry about. You pretend to care about the things that matter to them. He don't care about y'all. You're meat in the grinder. You're means to an end. And he showed exactly. He basically showed this country that it's not as far along as it imagines itself to be. It's not as sophisticated or civilized as it pretends to be. That's the good thing. He held up the mirror. So that's the good thing he did. He shows that people that say they're tired of the war machine don't really give a shit about the war machine as long as it's their guy running the war machine. Right now, we're talking about doing military operations in Cuba right now. We're spending billions of dollars a day in Iran. And 15 miles from me, there are families on our Air Force base that are on food stamps and having to go to food pantries because they don't get enough. They're not making enough to make ends meet. But the people that voted for him don't care about. They cared about the war machine up until he did it. Now they don't care about it no more. He showed the world that hypocrisy is not really a line in the sand. And illustrating one's hypocrisy doesn't mean anything to a certain segment of this country. They don't care if hypocrisy doesn't matter. They don't care if you're a hypocrite. As long as you hate the right people, they will do anything for you. It's not embarrassing. It's just I don't want to do it. I've lived 1,000 lives, man. And immigrants, right? I lived 1,000 lives, man. There are things that I would have done, I would have jumped at 10 years ago that don't move me right now. I don't want all right, man. Anyway, yeah, I just don't. I don't want to. I don't want to be. I don't want to. I don't want to have voice chat and debate with people, man. It's already gone. When you actually listen, when you've actually had death threats where somebody is posting a picture of your house online, you're very, very, very cautious about what people you give access to. And it's not for my safety, it's for somebody else's safety. So I've been there before, man. I'm not interested in that level of the internet anymore. Y'all can have it. There's plenty of people that you can call in and argue with, man. The brother who wears the cat ears, who has the cat ear headphone, I watch him all the time. Y'all can argue. He'll do voice chat with you, and he'll sit there and argue with you. They're all nihilists, yeah. We are in a death cult, man. Like this is a Judeo-Christian death cult right now. There are people honestly believing that we're at war with Iran because it's going to bring about the return of Jesus. They're telling soldiers that, bro. You can't. There's no reason to be had, and it doesn't matter that I don't subscribe to their beliefs. They're going to take us all with them anyway. Because they think this is how we're going to get to the revelation. They're telling soldiers this, bro. So, what's the point of debating that? I talk to people that disagree with me all the time, man. I talk to them in real life because I know them. I'm friends with some of them. Some of them aren't as close anymore because I realized that racism wasn't the red line. But I talk to people I disagree with all the time. What I don't do is argue with strangers on the internet. And that's what this is turning into. So at this point in time, if that's all it is, if that's the entire output of you want to get me on a voice chat so that you can whatever, that's just not gonna happen. I don't owe you access to me like that. And so and it started out like we were having a good conversation about X-Men and how disjointed X-Men was, and you have been wanting to jump on here and talk about Trump, and I hadn't even been talking about it. Why do you need to? You think you're going to convince me? Nah. It's all it is, an evangelical death cult. Some people think this is going to bring us revelation or whatever, and I just think it's not going to. So many Catholics don't realize they're not along for the ride. Right. This is evangelical, the Christian fundamentalist gig. The chosen people must be in the Holy Land, and now we're going to invade Iran, and they're hoping that this is the end of days. I don't want to be on. This is not the train I want to be on. I did not sign up for this. Consent, bro. Do you understand? Then block me. I'm happy to talk about anything. Or I just can just let you keep posting comments on here and just pretend you don't exist. I don't even have to block you, bro. Like, I am doing you a favor by clicking on your comment and putting it on my screen and showing it to my audience. You can keep posting comments all you want to. Doesn't mean I have to engage you. It's hilarious. Yes, I have an audience of 2. It's cool. Because when I repost this on TikTok, I get I got like, I have a video right now. It's my first. I'm heading up to 15,000 views on it. I got people willing to. I got. This is business. I got business opportunities off of talking about comic books right now, bro. I don't care about, I enjoy this because I enjoy engaging with people on this level. I don't want to do debate bro stuff. I like to get on here and talk to people who like talk about comic books and politics occasionally. But this is creating real world opportunities for me too. The other side is your audience of 2, haha. Okay, well, I mean, you can subtract yourself. Okay. Anyway, scared to have a chat. I'm scared of the obsession of somebody who demands to have access to me like that. That's weirdo stuff, bro. Knock yourself out. I'm not gonna have a voice chat with you. And we were talking about X-Men anyway. So anyway, Maddie, I really do appreciate you. I wanted to do more of an X-Men centric. Let me put together some notes so we can actually really chop it up about what's wrong with X-Men, because I like this thread, a conversation or whatnot, and have that conversation. Yeah, you're yelling into the void right now, bro. Like, I'm not gonna post. Like, you've decided that you're gonna troll, and that's cool. But I'm not even gonna give you the satisfaction of a block. Because that's what you want. You asked for it, so I'm not going to give it to you. That's how that works. And you can see when you start seeing me, when you actually start seeing me broadcasting from the storefront that I have, that's going to be related to this, then you could talk to me about my audience of 2. I'll see you in May. Now, and when you start seeing, me live streaming from there, you'll see what this actually turns into. When I'm surrounded by comic books and things that make me happy, and I'm actually making a living for me and my family with it, then you can see why I don't do debate bro stuff. Yeah, that's weirdo. Anyway, Maddie, I will catch you later. Again, I think I hit all my points anyway. So I got the character issues about Moon Knight coming up. I'll probably be doing another ADHD episode, just talking about how I keep things balanced and what rules I'm breaking that a lot of business owners follow, but I'm breaking them because it works with the way my mind works. And so that's the other stuff I'll have next week. We'll be back a little bit ADHD. Hopefully we have some more comic books that drops that we can chop it up about. But yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. I got to go up here and sit down and talk with my kids before we start doing our nighttime stuff. And analogical goat. I hope you find what you're looking for, man. I really do. Maybe you're going to find that person that will go into voice chats with you and stuff like that. I'm too grown. I just don't have any interest in it. But I appreciate you tuning in too. And, no animosity or anything. But again, I'll catch y'all next week. Talk to y'all later. Peace.